Welcome back, Montcalm computer science students. This lesson is assuming that you've already looked at and fully understand all the different variable types that we looked at. And today we're going to focus on floats, doubles, and integers, although we don't really use floats in our class that much. We usually stick with just double or integer. We're going to look at different operators as well as BEDMAS, which hopefully you guys have all done at some point in grade school. Just as a review for last lesson, and if you haven't watched that video or looked at that PowerPoint, please do so. We're looking at integers. Okay, so ints store whole numbers. When we declare it, that's what it looks like. So you say the word int, all lowercase, and then whatever variable name you want to name it. That will reserve a spot in memory for an integer. Decimal numbers are either going to be floats or doubles. The difference between them is a float only holds up to 7 digits after the decimal spot, whereas a double can hold up to 16 digits. So in order to declare or initialize it, you say the name of the variable, which is double, again, all lowercase, and then your variable name, and that's going to reserve a spot in memory for a double variable. Okay, so the difference between, let's say, a double and an int, ints are for whole numbers, doubles are for decimal numbers. Okay. Operators, so these are the different mathematical operations that we can use. There's one other one that you will learn in grade 11. But these are all the symbols that we have to choose from, okay? The only one that's really going to be maybe of any surprise to you would be multiplication, and it's because that's an asterisk. The other ones you've probably seen in math class actually used, right? So division's a /, multiplication's the asterisk, subtraction is the minus sign, which should be next to your 0 key, and addition, which is shift and then wherever your equals key is. You'll also know if you have a keyboard that has a number pad, you'll notice that on that number pad it'll have all these operations as well. But it depends on what kind of computer you're using, what kind of keyboard you're using. It may not have that numpad, but this is essentially all the operators that you need. Okay? When we're looking at integers, we said that they only stored whole numbers. So what happens if we do a calculation here that a decimal number would be the result? I'm going to pull up here our online Java compiler. You can do this in Eclipse as well. But if I declare an integer, and I'm just going to call it number, if I could spell properly here. So I'm going to declare it on one line. On the next line, I'm going to give it a value. Now again, I could do this all in one line, but I'm separating it here. So if I did, let's say, what's going to be odd? 17 divided by 3. Okay. We know that this is 5 2/3, because 5 times 3 is 15, and then I have 2 left over, so 5 2/3. So like 5.66666. Now, if I print out what this value is, okay, and now I execute, you will see it only gives us the whole number. It completely throws out the decimal number, because if you think about it, we only have so much space in memory, so if we try to go beyond that space, it's not going to be included in our number. So it only takes however many times it fully goes in. Okay, so that's important to know here. Let me get this out of the way for us. Okay, so when we do calculations with integers, it only calculates the amount of times it goes in fully, and it's always going to round down. Now, we can also use BEDMAS. Okay, so you're probably familiar with BEDMAS from grade 7 or 8. And BEDMAS will apply to any calculation. So we can make preference to, if we want something to be done first, we can use these brackets in order to in order to prioritize certain calculations. Okay, so here's an example right here. I'm going to, the way this is calculated, it will make the calculation in the brackets before it does this calculation and then adds on 1.5. Okay, so that's how BEDMAS can affect a calculation, and we can basically use it just like you would in math, and we just need to make sure that we're using the symbols, the operators that are the same as in math class. Okay, so that's important there. I've given you some examples of how we can do, calculations here. The next slide here we're looking at is we can have multiple variables in the same equation. Okay, so in your code you have to have a variable on the left hand side if you're giving it a new value. Okay, and once we have the equal sign, it says that we're giving a new value for this integer. Okay, now we don't have to declare it you have to declare it once, but even later in the program we wouldn't put the int if it was, but this is when it's being created. So so here we have an example of an equation here, but if I scroll down here, how do I move this thing? Can't. Can I hide you? Okay, if I get my thing off the key. There we go. So you can see here, minutes, I'm making a calculation. Distance, I'm making I'm assigning a value. For the speed here, I'm assigning it a new value, and I'm saying that it is the distance divided by the minutes. So what's going to happen here is the value that's right here is going to be substituted here, and whatever this calculation is equal to is going to be substituted here, and then this calculation will be performed. Okay? And then in the last line there where it's being cut off, that is simply printing out to our console what the value of speed is. So that whatever's calculated in this third line there is going to be substituted right over here. Okay? So I know it can often be quite intimidating when you're given a math problem and it's like, how do I make this in Java, right? So I've kind of got some steps here that hopefully will help you kind of get started on a question. Whenever I get a problem and I'm not sure immediately how to solve it, the first thing I do is identify all the values that we need to store as variables in order to solve that problem. I also need to identify which variables I know. So which values am I given, just like in math class. And then the next step via code would be to assign them values. Okay? Step 3, once I've done that, I need to figure out which variables I need to solve for. So which variables do I not have values for? And if I'm still stuck at this point, I like to almost put away the code and get out a pencil and paper. I know it's archaic, but I was born a couple decades ago. And I would write down the equation. I would figure out, okay, well, if I was doing math, how would I solve this? Because sometimes I can figure out things on paper without kind of constructing an equation, and then I need to come up with an equation from that. If you're able to do that, then you can convert the equation in step 4 into Java. So into code using the operators and BEDMAS that using the round brackets there that is in slide 4. And then lastly, I'm printing out what my variable, what the variable name is. That way I know if I got the right answer. Because if I didn't, then it'll become very apparent right there. So hopefully these steps help, because I know it can be a little intimidating at first. I'm going to go through just an example here. before you start your math practice exercises, and I'll give you some basic instructions there. So if we were given a problem here, okay, so if I was given this scenario where I needed to convert what the temperature is in Celsius to Fahrenheit, I could do that using code here. So I've created a variable and I've made it a double. I did this because I know that when I do this conversion, that it is going to deal with decimal numbers, so it just makes it easier. In grade 11, we look at how to convert things back and forth. But for your, not for your practice, but for your assignment, make sure that you are using doubles for everything because of that. So I've created two variables here. One's Fahrenheit, one's Celsius. I'm converting to Fahrenheit. Now, I'm going to say Fair equals, and I use the short form because I can't remember how to actually spell it, and I just have to remember here. So I have to multiply by 9 and then divide by 5 and add 32. Okay, so I want to make sure, even though this probably would work fine, I do like to put in my brackets there just so the order of operation is clear. Oh, and I put the wrong variable there because I need Celsius. So what's going to happen here is this value here will be substituted into here. So 7 is going to replace this word Celsius. So it'll be 7 times 9 and then divided by 5. I'm actually going to make this 5.0 because I think it might guess that it's integer division and not take our decimal number, but if I put a decimal 0 there, it for sure will. This is not something I would take off marks for in grade 10 anyways, but just so that we're accurate. And then I'm adding 32. When I'm printing out my thing, I need to print out the variable name so that it displays it. And now when I execute, it should be equal to 44.6 Fahrenheit, which is equal to Celsius. So that's just an example of what that would look like. I should look at the math practice here, just go over it with you to make sure that it's clear. Here it is. Okay, so this first section is pretty easy and quite straightforward. You're going to replace this underscore with whatever operation is right here. Okay, so that should be easy. You've got all the multiplication, subtraction, addition, division. Then for part 2, I've done the first one. I've given you this as an example. So you're going to store whatever value it asks you to calculate in a variable called number. So it'll always start number equals, and then you're following this. So I say add 47 and 24, and then divide the result by 9. I needed to put these in parentheses, otherwise it would have done 24 by 9 first, right? Because it would do the BEDMAS. So that's for that example there. I am asking you to do those, and then I've got some word problems here for you guys as well. Okay, so those are your practice. Make sure you do this and hand it in on the post that is only to do with the practice exercises on the Google Classroom. Okay, good luck. Let me know if there's any trouble, and I'll be hosting Google Meets Tuesday, Thursday, 11:30 to 12:30. All right, good luck.